right, I'm Bruce, the Apartment Guy Peterson, and this is Multifamily Acquisition Timeline. So the goals and objectives for the class are to understand the steps involved in the acquisition of a multifamily asset, go over the team members you will want to have lined up and when to engage to ensure a successful transaction, get across the importance of the timeline and help identify the items you must move on quickly in the process, the importance of staying on track and on time, and by adhering to this timeline as closely as possible, you greatly improve your chances of a successful process for you and your investors. Why is this so important? Did you know the number one issue or missed opportunity in the acquisition process is simply not moving timely enough when dealing with others on your team? By not staying on top of the process and timeline, you could cost yourself thousands of dollars and even jeopardize the close altogether. Conversely, if you stay on top of things and close quickly and without incident, you strengthen your name and standing in the very small world of multifamily investing. So your team members in the process. I'm going to break this down into two pieces. You have acquisition team members and the post-closing team members. So the acquisition team members you're going to have your mortgage broker, and your mortgage broker is going to be the guy or the lady on your team that is going to help secure the loan for you. They're going to enable you to put your best foot forward. Especially on your first deal, many of you won't have a lot of experience, if any experience, and it's their job to make sure that they paint you in the best light possible. They're not going to exaggerate, they're not going to lie or fabricate anything on your behalf, and don't you try to do it either, because you will get caught, I promise. But it's their job to make you look the best they can with the information you give them. They don't get paid unless you get a loan, so they're really going to work in every way possible to make sure that loan goes well for you. You also have your real estate attorney. Now, your real estate attorney is going to be the team member that you're going to basically employ from the very beginning. You find a deal, you assess the deal, you think this deal works very well, I think I want to move forward with it, so I want to make an offer. That's when you're going to employ your real estate attorney. That person is going to help you draw up your LOI or your letter of intent. So that's basically the high-level first approach to getting this thing under contract. It'll talk about how much you plan to offer on the property, the timeline to close, how long you think it's going to take you to close, the amount of earnest money you're willing to put up, and just real basic things. Once you get that accepted, it might take you 5, 10, 20, 30 different LOIs to get a first deal accepted. But once it gets accepted, then you go in and you start negotiating the actual contract with all the fine details. This person will be there for you on that end too. They're going to help you negotiate all the gotchas in the contract, because if you're buying from somebody else, it's their contract for the most part, and you just got to make sure their contract to buy their property works for you and that you understand everything. Once you get through the contract phase, they're still going to be working with you. They will work with you basically the entirety of your process until the day you close, and sometimes a few days after that to tidy things up. But they're going to be running all the title work. They're going to be doing all the survey work, making sure those are acceptable to your title company. They're going to be running UCC searches to make sure there are no encumbrances on the property. So they're going to handle the entire transaction for you. They are the intermediary between you and the seller. You guys will pretty much never have contact with each other. You're also going to have a syndication attorney. Now, the real estate attorney, they're dealing with the transaction itself to actually physically buy the property. Your syndication attorney is somebody that's going to help put your offering together that you will send out to your investors. That will be everything from the private placement memorandum, the offering memorandum, or company agreement sometimes, and you will also have your subscription agreement. It's all the documents needed to have a successful syndication or security, because what you're really doing when you syndicate, you are forming a security that syndication attorney has to help you craft to make sure you stay within guidelines and regulations with regard to the SEC. You're also going to have an insurance agent or company. These are people you're going to bring into the picture pretty early on. A lot of people will think, I don't need to bring them into my world until after we have it under contract. I disagree completely. You really need to have that person involved before you have the accepted contract. because they're going to be able to tell you what they think they can underwrite, or basically the amount of the insurance policy for that property, and they can vary widely. So you want to have them involved pretty early on when you're trying to make the decision as to whether or not this deal makes sense for you. You'll also look at the management company if you're not going to manage yourself. Most people will not manage themselves. I do manage myself, but I'm kind of a rarity. I'd say maybe 20% of this industry manages themselves. So you're probably going to have a third-party management company that you will want involved pretty early on also, because you want to make sure that as you're building out your budget or your projections for this property, you pass it by the professionals. Make sure they can manage it the way you anticipate it to be managed. If not, they'll let you know. They can also help you do the initial walkthrough, the inspections, the lease file audit on the property once you get it under contract. Then you will also have a property management software company. Now you need to get these guys on board, I would say 2 to 4 weeks before you close. This is if you're going to self-manage. Again, if you're going to third-party manage, they'll handle all that. You won't have to worry about it. But if you are going to self-manage, you need these people involved pretty early on. Now, I say that not as early as the other team members. 2 to 4 weeks out is fine, because it's going to take a little while to get your chart of accounts and your software set up, all your late fee structure within the program, all of your investors will be put into that software as well, because it'll help you track distributions to your investors. They will also input all the residents to build out your rent roll. So they're going to be doing a lot of work for you. There is an implementation process for them, and it can take a week or two. So I usually like to reach out to them about 2 to 4 weeks beforehand, and then they can tell you what they need and when they need it. Once you have the property closed, you're going to engage your post-closing team members. And those are your CPA or bookkeeper, your tax protest company, and your cost segregation specialist. So you want a CPA or a bookkeeper pretty early on also. You know, a lot of people say, well, you don't need it until taxes are due. That's not true. You need your CPA/bookkeeper, primarily your bookkeeper, to be involved right away. They're going to help make sure that the entire process gets set up properly the first time or right away. If you get everything set up in your business wrong because you did it and you tried to cheap out, not hire a professional, you're going to end up paying this professional later to undo all the screw-ups that you've created. Don't do that. It's going to make your life a lot more stressful and a lot more difficult. So get somebody involved right away and make sure it's somebody that understands real estate. Within the CPA world or the bookkeeper world, there are different industries, and they will have expertise in each individual enterprise or industry, I should say. Make sure they know what they're doing with regard to real estate investing. And it's best if you can find somebody that invests themselves. That's not always going to be the case, but if you can, it really helps. Your tax protest company, every single year you are going to protest your taxes without exception. Just know that going in. And I mean, it can save you tens of thousands of dollars a year, so you'll always do that. And then lastly, you're going to have your cost segregation specialist. These are the people that help you run your property on a tax-free basis or a tax-deferred basis at the very least. You will get your distributions throughout the years of owning that property almost entirely non-taxed, but they're the ones that are going to help make that happen. So you're going to have a cost segregation specialist also. All right, so we've talked about the team members. Here we go, right? So the initial work to get the deal. You're going to find a deal that looks promising, schedule the initial property tour with a broker. You're going to underwrite or assess the deal. Do the numbers make sense? You will need to provide your takeover budget to the lender at some point, so be ready. So this underwriting that you're doing, or these projections that you're building, these budgets, you're doing that to make sure the deal works for you, but your lender is also going to want to see them to see if they kind of want to make sure you know what you're doing. They're going to build out their own budget, but if you're off wildly on different aspects of that budget, they will talk to you. They'll push back softly. We're way off on payroll. Can you explain to me why? And if you've got a good reason for why you're a lot cheaper on payroll than I am, we can go with your number. But you're going to have that for them too. You're going to have your insurance company get you a soft quote at this point. Okay, because again, this is at the beginning. It doesn't have to be dialed in. It just has to be a number you can work from to make sure the deal works with their soft quote. Get the debt quote from your lender or your mortgage broker, and that's needed for underwriting also. So basically, you're going to go to your mortgage broker and say, this is the property, this is who I am, what do you think you can get me for a loan? Sometimes you'll get an 80% loan. Many times in today's market, I'm only getting 70% loans. That could be a massive difference in your return. So you have to really know what your loan is going to be or what it looks to be. And they can give you a very high conviction answer as to what they think they can source for you in the way of a loan. Once you have all that lined up, the deal makes sense, you're then going to submit your letter of intent or your LOI, and you're going to have your real estate attorney draft that for you, especially on your first 1, 2, 3 deals. Once you get really good at it, you can kind of boilerplate that. Just change the name of the property, the address, and the specifics of that property. But at the beginning, you're definitely going to want your real estate attorney to help draft that for you. If the deal looks promising, you need to engage your syndication attorney to begin drawing up the offering docs that we talked about. Be ready to write a $5,000 to $15,000 check at this point. This is the first chunk of money you're going to have to come up with out of your pocket to get this syndication deal done. You will be reimbursed by the partnership once you close on the property. You and your partnership, your LLC, you own the property now. Well, now you will submit receipts, basically, or invoices saying these are all the upfront costs that I fronted. I need to be reimbursed because those are property or LLC expenses. They're not my expense as a syndicator, but I do need to front those costs. If you win the bid, you now start negotiating the actual contract or PSA, the purchase sale agreement. Now we're going to assume you're under contract, and the first thing you're going to have is a due diligence period, or basically an inspection period. That will be negotiated deal to deal, but typically what we see is 20 to 30 days for due diligence. So basically this is the time when you're going to crawl all over the property, look at all the major systems with your contractors, do your lease file audit, and just make sure the property is what you thought it was. So week 1, you're going to notify your insurance company to start firming up their quote. This could take a few weeks, so please do not put this off. You're going to have your lender start working on the loan. This is the next cost you will incur. There will be anywhere from about a $15,000 to a $35,000 loan application fee. You don't pay it, they won't do it for you. You will not get a loan. It's expensive. Yeah, it's really expensive, but this is the next chunk of money. That's why to get into a syndication, you really need to have a decent amount of money, or you got to have somebody that's willing to put that money up for you on a short-term basis where they can be repaid after you close. They're going to charge you a premium for that. Why wouldn't they? They're going to lend you, in this case, $35,000. They're going to expect something for that. But again, these are more of the upfront costs. Within the first 3 days, you're going to want to schedule your on-site inspections. The owner typically needs 48 hours notice to the residents to conduct this. It is going to be in-unit inspections. To crawl around the property on the outside, look at the roof and the foundation and the wood-destroying insects for the most part, the parking lot, things like that. You're not going to inconvenience the residents, so you don't need to give them notice for that. But when you do enter a residence unit, most owners are going to either have required or want to give 48-hour notice. So you want to get this moving pretty quickly. It's not necessary, but it really helps to conduct a webinar for your prospective investors to go over the deal. Remember, we're buying a property, but we're talking about syndicating that property. So a lot of these steps are the steps you need to go through to make sure that the property gets closed and that the property is what you thought it was and it still makes sense. But the other piece of this, remember, you are syndicating this. So you do need to get something out to your investors as soon as you can. And I like to do a webinar. Again, it's not necessary. I think it helps because it's putting a human touch to the offering packet that you're going to send them, the PPM, the company agreement, and the subscription agreement. Those are just static, just boring documents. This is something that on this webinar, we're going to walk through what the deal looks like, why we like the deal, our background, our history, and kind of the rules of the road, what we anticipate this looking like, how we plan to govern this thing, how we plan to manage it. So again, for me, I think it's a big deal. When you do these webinars, one thing to keep in mind, you want to record these things because not everybody that's a prospective investor will have the time to come on with you live for your webinar. So you want to be able to get out a recorded version of it when you're done. The next thing you're going to do, and again, this is not linear, keep that in mind. You're going to be doing these things all within the first week. This is the way I do it anyways. So you're going to file your articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State to get your EIN. Or your employer identification number. This is how you pay your taxes, and the government tracks you. You'll need the EIN for lots of stuff and can't open the business accounts without it. So this is when you want to do it, sometime within that first week. Now we're into week 2. Week 2 is on-site inspection week for me, right? It's hard to get it done the first week because you have to give some notice. You have to sync up schedules. But week 2, you're going to do your on-site inspections. Those consist of the major systems. You're going to camera the sewer lines for every single building to make sure they look okay. There's not any breaks, massive tree root problems. You're going to have somebody come out and walk for wood destroying insects. Make sure that it's in good shape, because if you don't find it, your lender's going to find it, because they're going to send out people into the field to actually walk the asset themselves to see what they think. So go ahead and get that looked at too. You're going to get a pool inspection to make sure everything's up to code, nothing's dangerous, nothing needs to be repaired. You're going to have a roofing company come out. You're going to have boilers and chillers inspected if you have those on your properties, and about 20% of mine do, so it's not unheard of to see that. It's not terribly common, but it will come up. You're going to have an electrician to walk the electrical panel and the GFCIs. So the electrical panels in each unit, or a few units to say, okay, they're all the same and we feel confident in what we found, but also the ground fault circuit interrupters, right? So you got to make sure that you have these safety outlets around every water source. And I believe the code in Texas anyways, it might be different throughout the country, but anything within 6 feet of a water source, your kitchen sink, your bathroom sink, you have to have one of these that will trip in case water gets into it. So you got to make sure those are in your units. If not, Fannie Mae or your lender, they are going to require those. You're going to bring out a foundation company or a structural engineer. I say or a structural engineer because you got to remember, if you're bringing out a foundation company to walk the foundations, if it's not level, they're going to say you need to fix it. That's not true. My rule of thumb is as long as you're within 5 to 6 inches of plumb or level, it usually doesn't bother me. As long as your windows and your doors function properly, as long as they open and close, and you're within 5 to 6 inches of being level, it's usually not an ordeal. If you get a pushback from a foundation company and they say, look, there's $300,000 worth of work to be done, okay. You need to get a structural engineer involved at that point to make sure what of this scope of work is absolutely needed to make sure nobody gets injured, nothing falls down, and nothing goes haywire. So again, sometimes the foundation company can do it for you, especially if it comes back clean. You feel pretty safe in that because they're working up a bid for work, basically is what they're doing. They're sales guys out there trying to generate work. I'm not saying they would ever tell you anything inaccurate or scare you, but they are going to be the company potentially to make the money off of it. So just be careful with what you're doing there. And then for anything else that's not covered, a lot of time you're going to hire a general contractor or engage a general contractor that will walk the property for any carpentry things or other things that weren't covered by any of these other major contractors and major systems. They will do all the rest of it. So I have them walk a lot of times if I'm going to do a remodel of a leasing office. Sometimes they will be the company that I use to do all of my unit upgrades if I want to use an outside company. I've used them to give me a quote to repair faulty balconies, handrails, guardrails. Also, I've built a lot of fences along bottom story units to give you a private little enclosed fence back there. So for that, I've always had general contractors give me a bid. So you'll also want to get those guys involved. More on week 2. So that was exterior. Now you have unit interiors that you're going to be walking. When you walk the unit interiors, you're going to walk every unit, even if you have to make an extra trip to ensure there are no surprises. You have a 200 unit property you're trying to buy and you can't get into 5 units. Well, though, that may have been on purpose. Don't think anybody would be that kind of person, but some of them are. They're going to purposely say, oh, I can't find the key for that one, or the resident changed the lock on us and we can't get it. You got to figure out how to get in there, because that could be the unit that has a grow lab in it or a meth lab in it that they're trying to get cleaned up, but they haven't yet and they don't want you to see it. It could be a burned out unit that's just completely gutted. You're going to have to spend $10,000 to $15,000 to bring that thing back online. So you got to look at all of them. You're also looking for major costly issues that are not normal unit make-ready expense items. You're looking for missing appliances, destroyed flooring, active water leaks, holes in or missing floors and walls. So when I do my unit walkthroughs, basically what I'm looking for are things that are very costly that could affect the bottom line on the property that I need to address on my cash raise up front with my rehab dollars. This is done by two-person teams. Before we get too much into that, you can hire this out to a third-party company. And those guys, what I've seen, they usually charge between $20 and $30 per unit, and they'll go through and walk every unit for you, and they'll create a very detailed report outlining everything you've asked them to look for. They're going to check all the different systems in there, make sure everything looks good, make sure everything works properly. Very often, though, you're going to do this yourself or with the help of your management company. So the way I do it, we take our management company, it's my management company, we self-manage. We take our staff into these units, 2 people at a time. One person walks around and they look for all the problems, or they're checking all the systems as they go. They're looking, do all the walls look good? The ceilings look good? Are the appliances all there? Are there any water leaks? So they're walking around and inspecting. The second person on the team, they're writing everything that this person finds and taking any pictures that need to be taken. If you're planning on doing unit upgrades once the property is closed on, this is a good time to notice what the condition of the items you would like to look at upgrading are in. So again, if you know that you're going to upgrade 50% of the property, so in this 200 unit property, you have 100 units that you're going to turn around. You're going to upgrade for, say, a 50 to 100 to 200 unit rent bump. You need to look at those 100 units, find out which ones have the appliances that you already wanted to do. Well, now you don't have to worry about it on those respective units. Look at the flooring that's already in there. Maybe they've already got some good flooring for you, so now you don't have to raise money for all of it because some of them have been done. If none of them have been done, well, now you know. Now it's going to help you firm up your rehab budget on the front end. Continued in week 2. The last part of on-site inspections is your lease file audit. So when you do that, I usually come in with about 3 or 4 people, and you go through every single lease on property for everybody that lives there. Because when you get the information packet from the broker, when you first express interest in this property, they're going to give you a T12, which is a trailing 12-month income statement or a profit and loss statement. They're also going to give you a rent roll. A rent roll is a listing of everybody that lives there, when they moved in, when they're scheduled, when their lease terminates or expires, what they're paying in rent, all the other charges, like if they rent a washer and dryer from you, that will be listed there as well, the amount of their security deposit, and then any background screening that company has done to check their credit, to check their criminal background. All that stuff should be in there also. The big thing you're doing here is you're going to compare that rent roll that you were given early on in the process to the physical lease that the resident actually signed. If they are not the same, you have to go with the legal lease. No option. That's the legal document they signed. I don't care what the rent roll says, you have to honor the lease. So if there's a disparity there between what the lease says and what the rent roll says, you got to figure that out. If you are off by, say, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, and let's say unit 101 on the rent roll says they're supposed to be paying $1,000 per unit per month, and then you look at the lease and it says they're only paying $800. Well, why is that? Well, not important right now why that is. You can ask questions, you need to know why, but the biggest thing you have to concern yourself with, you're missing $200 in income you thought you had by looking at their documents, their financials. That doesn't exist, right? They're only paying $800, not $1,000. If that number is big enough, if it's really, really small, there's a couple of dollars or a couple of pennies missing here or there by mistake, an honest mistake, not a big deal. You come up with tens of thousands of dollars in inaccuracies, you need to go back through your real estate attorney. Remember, we talked about that person earlier. Get that person to communicate with the seller's real estate attorney and say, hey guys, we have an issue here. You need to figure that stuff out before the conclusion of your due diligence period, because once your due diligence period is up, whatever earnest money you put up to get the property under contract is likely going to be forfeited if you decide to pull the trigger and back out of the deal. So you got to know this stuff up front. Ensure that both lease start and end dates and the lease and the supplied rent roll match also. You just want to make sure everything jives. I like to notice whether or not they have the screening of the tenants that we talked about also. If they're not screening tenants, you can't come in and say, hey, you aren't screened, you're out. No, you have to honor the existing lease. When it comes up for renewal, if they want to stay, well, now you can implement your screening process if they weren't using it before. All right, so now we're moving into week 3. Most of your on-site stuff is done. Well, all of your on-site stuff should be done by this point. What you're going to do week 3 basically is start putting the whole picture together. Remember, you have your 20 to 30 day window to get it all figured out to see, okay, the deal still makes sense. I didn't find any scary $100,000 problems that I need to address, so you can keep going. So week 3, you're going to compile all of the rehab and repair budgets you got from the on-site inspection, as well as the findings of the lease file audit to firm up the numbers you're estimating and underwriting for your rehab budget. So again, you're just compiling all the stuff that you've gathered. All these contractors are supplying bids to you, and on this, you only need one bid per thing to me. You can come back with your follow-up bids after you get closed. You're just trying to find a working number. So just call one roofing company. If the roofing company comes out and says it's going to be $25,000 to repair these few areas on your roof, okay, does that work in your numbers to continue trying to purchase this property? If it does, fine, move on. Once you close, then you will get bid number 2, 3, and 4 to make sure you get the best bid you can. But for right now, just get one bid for every major system, and if the numbers work with that, you're fine. Your lender will have a list of required repairs that you'll have to add into the rehab budget as well. So part of this is your lender is also going to send out their own inspectors to look over the property because they are your largest partner in this deal. They're going to give you a 70 to 80% loan very often. They're your 70 to 80% partner. You got to remember that. So they're going to send a team out to walk the entire thing in addition to all the bids that you got for rehab to make sure that they feel comfortable in providing this loan to you. Whatever they find, let's say they find $100,000 worth of required repairs. They're not going to lend to you unless you agree to perform those required repairs. And they'll usually give you up to a year depending on the severity of it. If it's a life safety thing, they're probably going to give you anywhere from 1 to 3 months to fix it. Anything that's not critical to life and safety, then they'll usually give you up to a year to get those things done. But let's say they find $100,000 worth of work that needs to be done. They're going to say, okay, we're going to give you the loan with the understanding that you will fix these. Well, to make sure you fix these, you're a good person, but they don't know that. They're going to tell you, give me $100,000 at closing. I'm going to put that in an escrow account for you. When you prove to me that you've finished this project, I send an inspector out. They make sure that you've done this project, and to their expectations, they will then give you your $100,000 back. By the end of week 3, you should have your offering docs back from your syndication attorney. Now is the time to get those docs to the interested investors. Don't delay on this, as they will need time to go through everything and potentially have their own attorneys look it over. I stress to everybody that's thinking about investing with us, if you don't understand these hundreds of pages of documents I'm going to send you, you damn well better have somebody look at it for you, because I'm not. These are my documents. You have to make sure that you're comfortable with what I'm doing and my offering. If you're not, it's totally okay. Move on, find another deal that fits what you're looking for a little better. But again, remember, they are your docs. Your investors need to go out and have an independent attorney look at them, explain it to them, make sure they understand everything that's in those docs. Many of your investors will do that, and it could take a week to turn those documents around sometimes. Don't delay getting those documents out to your investors as soon as you possibly can. And now it's time to open your bank accounts. Now, you're going to open your bank accounts only if you're getting toward the end of your due diligence period. So the end of week 3, we'll say, or maybe even the beginning of week 4, depending on how many days you have. Remember, you're going to have 20 to 30 typically. But I want to wait until I know for a fact I'm going to move forward with this deal past due diligence. Because once that happens, it's safe to open those bank accounts. If I get past due diligence and go, oh, you know what, I don't want to buy this. Well, I just needlessly opened some bank accounts. So don't do that until you know for sure that you're going to move forward. When I open the bank accounts, I always go with a national bank. I don't go with a local bank, a regional bank, or a credit union. Because very often my investors are going to be spread throughout the nation. I need there to be access, because some people just like to physically go in the location. No problem. I don't need to do that, but a lot of people do. So I use, a Bank of America, a Wells Fargo, some Citibank, some really, really large Capital One bank that's going to be available throughout the country to make things easier for people. Now we're into week 4. Okay, so now you've decided this deal makes sense for you. We're starting to wrap everything up in your due diligence period. Most of the heavy lifting should be done by this point. Bids received, unit interiors addressed, and the lease file audit findings have been put together. Remember, those lease file audits, if you find something that's a pretty big deal, you got to get your attorney involved and have them start communicating back before the expiration of your due diligence, or you could get hung. If you find any problems or inaccuracies with the lease file audit, and you will need to get with your attorney to discuss how to present your findings to the seller. This needs to be done before the expiration of your feasibility, like we talked about. You should have the answer on your loan by now, provided you were diligent and got the info that your lender needed as they need it. Again, more of that same thing. Make yourself available. When your lender says they need something, when your mortgage broker says they need something, you've got to get it to them. Because if you don't have your loan answer by the end of feasibility, and you don't have a finance contingency, which very often you don't in today's seller's market, let's back up. A finance contingency means that once due diligence passes, I don't get my money back for anything unless I don't get the loan. That's a finance contingency. Most of the time, those are being waived right now. So if you don't have the answer on your loan before the end of due diligence, you go forward and then you don't get the loan for some reason, there's a very high likelihood you're going to lose your earnest money. You got to have those answers in hand now. If all looks good, you will continue on. Your earnest money will now be hard, and you will keep working through the loan process over the next 4 weeks. So week 5, now you're out of due diligence. Now you're just moving forward. Try to make sure that the loan stays on track. The insurance is still on track and everything's working out well. Now in week 5, you're going to get your property management software rolling. Your property management company rolling on setting up the new property in their system. If you're doing that yourself, this is when you want to get your property management software company involved to start setting up your books for you. If not, just make sure that your management company is doing that on your behalf. This could take a few weeks, so get them started now. You're going to file your DBA paperwork or assumed name or doing business as. So when I buy a property, I buy it in the name of a company that nobody has any idea what this is. I buy PRB Equity 19A would be an example of one of my acquiring entity names. Nobody at the property, none of your residents know what the hell that means. So it's PRB Equity 19A, DBA, doing business as Regatta Apartments. That way when I go to the bank, they don't expect to see the checks made out to PRB Equity 19A. They know that's the name of the account, but it can also be listed as Regatta Apartments on the checks. So just make sure you have that all set up to go to. Set up any additional vendors needed, if any. While you're going through due diligence, you're going to let the seller know which of the currently used vendors, landscape, security companies, trash companies, all these vendors that they're using, which of those companies do you want to continue with after you close and which you would like for them to terminate because you have your own providers. At this point now in week 5, you're going to set up any additional vendors you need to replace the ones that you maybe told them, look, please, go ahead and give them the 30-day notice of termination, and then you can put your own people in place. So this is going to go on in week 5. Make sure all of the local utility companies have been notified of the potential close date. You should have a pretty solid close date, let's say June 21st. That could change sometimes, but let them know what's going on. They'll tell you what, if anything, is needed from you to make sure that on day 1 of operations, you still have water flowing through the property, you still have electricity turned on everywhere. It's usually a very, very simple process. They just change the name on the account, shut the old one off, and turn the new one on, and you never have an interruption of service, but just make sure. Notify your security alarm company of the close date and get them set up. This is one of the few companies that I've dealt with anyways that will not let you transfer service into the new buyer's name. Won't let it happen. So we typically use a company called ADT. So I can't just assume the existing account of the seller. They have to completely shut it down. I have to get ADT started in my name the day that we start ownership. Again, if you drag your feet on this, you have a potential of taking over a brand new property with tens of thousands of dollars in a leasing office or in your maintenance closet or shed that's going to be totally open to the world because it's not protected because you don't have this stuff set up. Get it set up now. Do what you got to do to make sure everything runs smoothly. Begin the staffing process as well. Interview existing employees if any of them are interested and available. Again, this is talking from the standpoint of you managing it yourself. You're not going to third-party manage. You're not going to outsource management. If you're going to outsource management, your management company will handle this. You won't have to worry about it. But if you're doing it yourself, start figuring out who on staff wants to stay or is interested in staying. For any other positions not being covered by the existing staff, you need to get your ad placed, Craigslist, Indeed, Monster, wherever you're going to put it, get your ad out there so you can start getting candidates. Now, week 6, you're going to make your staffing decisions. So you've already got your ad up, you've been getting resumes, you've been holding interviews, conducting interviews, and now you need to make your staffing decisions. New hires will need to give at least 2 weeks, so keep that in mind. So if you come to somebody a week before close, I got a week to go, I'm fine. No, you're not fine because most professional people are going to want to give 2 weeks notice, sometimes even more than that. So you've got to make these decisions within about, I would say 3 to 4 weeks before you close is what I like to do to give myself plenty of time to let them give notice to their existing employer. You should have staffing figured out no later than 3 weeks prior to close for that reason. At this point, you're also going to set your budget based on your underwriting done at the beginning of the process. So basically, you're going to take the underwriting that you did when you decided to make an offer on this property. You're going to, remember, pull together all the bids that you got from all of your contractors, the required repairs mandated by your lender, put all that stuff together, finalize your budgets. And now you're going to make sure your insurance company has the finalized quote for you and the lender. This is one of those things that if not finalized and ready by close date, you will not be able to close, which would cost you some real money if you have to extend the close date. Oftentimes you can extend by a few days, a week or 2, but most contracts are going to come with penalties. If I have to extend by a week, it's going to cost me another $25,000 often or more. Now, post due diligence continued. Now you're in weeks 7 through 10. Now it's not easy, but you're just kind of making sure that the ship stays on course. Keep your eye on the finish line and stay engaged with the lender to provide any last-minute items they may need. Go over the budget with your newly hired property manager or management company. Make sure you're on the same page. 1 or 2 days prior to close, you will need to finalize the prorations that the seller provides. You will either agree to their numbers or work through any disagreement. This is going to be handled by your real estate attorney. So basically what happens, what I mean by prorations. Let's say you buy a property and you close on the 15th of the month and there's 30 days in that month. The owner has owned it for the first 15 days. You will own it for the second 15 days. We collect rent at the beginning of every month, not the end of the month. So they pay on the 1st to cover all 30 days. Well, 50% of that payment is due to you because you will own it for half of that month. That's what I mean by prorations. You got to figure out how much is owed to you, how much the seller gets to keep. All right, so you've gotten to this point, right? Now you're closed. You made it. Well, you've almost made it. So you've got a few more things you got to worry about. First thing in the morning, you'll need to head to the bank and initiate the wire transfer for the money needed to close. The wire is usually completed within an hour or 2. So what typically happens for me, because a lot of times I buy in a city that's not the city I live in. I live in Austin. Very often I'll buy in San Antonio. San Antonio is about an hour and a half away, so it's perfect. They go to the bank first thing in the morning when they open, 9 o'clock. I'm usually done transmitting the wire at 9:15. It runs through all the back channel stuff electronically, and usually about an hour or 2 later, it's been received by the seller. Once that has been received by the seller, the title company will actually send out notice to say, hey, we are totally funded. Congratulations for all involved. The transaction has officially closed. So now you are closed. You're going to wait word that the wire has been received and you are finally closed, and then you're going to head to the property, and now the real fun begins. So while that seemed like a lot of work, and it was, very complicated, lots of moving parts, and again, it's not one moving part finished, Go to the next movie. No, you'll have 43 different moving parts going on all at once as you're seeing, and you got to keep them all going together. You've got to keep all those plates in the air, all those balls in the air, and not drop any of them because it can screw you up pretty bad. It can cost you lots of money. Some key takeaways, though, and a recap of what we've just talked about. Before you get started, identify your team members. Have them ready to go when you need them. Some of these folks may not be available when the time comes, so it's best to have backups if possible. You're going to have a real estate attorney that helps you negotiate the contract. Well, I would have 3, at least 2. When it's time to negotiate a contract on something that you're trying to buy, maybe your attorney is ill, maybe they're on their honeymoon, maybe they're just on some kind of vacation, or something's going on, they cannot help you. Have backups. Have a backup syndication attorney if you need them. So have as many backups and redundancies as you can in your life to make sure things go smoothly. Keeping to your timeline will help preserve your sanity and make for a relatively painless process. That's why you have team members. Rely on your mortgage broker to help you get the loan. Rely on your real estate attorney to make sure that everything gets done in a way that protects you and you're not exposed. And have your syndication attorney there to make sure that you do everything legally with respect to your syndication. Make yourself as available as possible, as your attorney and lender will need answers in a timely manner to keep you on track. Yes, I'm beating this to death, but it's the most important thing. Do not let things slide. This means you probably shouldn't schedule or go on vacation during this period. If you do, you are inviting problems and lots of stress. Why do I have to say that? Because it happens all the damn time. People don't think far enough in advance. If you got to cancel your trip and maybe lose some money, it's probably better than losing a deal. But try to keep that stuff coordinated. Make sure you know timelines on your calendar and your schedule. Make sure things don't conflict, and it'll make it a lot easier for you. So that's it, guys. I appreciate the time. If you want to know more information or reach out, you would like to invest with us, you would like more information on syndicating, go to apartmentguy.com. That's apt-guy.com. Or you can email me at invest@apt-guy.com. Thanks.